When you're the captain of a ship, you need to be able to rely on those under your command. Though every member of the crew is vital in their own way, there is perhaps none more crucial to the running of your ship than your first officer. The clue's in the name. They are the highest ranking official outside of the commander themselves and are responsible for ensuring the smooth operations. History has graced us with some fabulous examples here. We've Spock, who effectively designed what it means to be the number one. We have William T. Riker, the trombone enthusiast and fiercely loyal number one to Picard. Kieran Reese served as executive officer under Sisko, though without the Starfleet uniform to match, for the most part. On Deep Space Nine, she was a critical component not simply in running the station, but in ensuring the peaceful cooperation between Starfleet and Bajor. There are dozens of examples of fine officers, all of whom could top a ranking of greatest contributors to history. This isn't that list. This is, to put it simply, the rest. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 worst ever first officers in Star Trek. Number 10. Will Decker. In a way, this is low-hanging fruit. Decker, son of the late Commodore, only appears in the motion picture, where we, the audience, are treated to a series of the man's demotions. Decker, in fairness to him, did very little to deserve these things. So why is he here? If we take the pros first, he knows Enterprise far better than Admiral Kirk at this stage, even saving the ship with his knowledge in the wormhole. Then there is a lot to like. However, as the template for Will Riker, Decker left a little to be desired. For example, though he mostly took his demotions on the chin, his inability to separate the Ilia probe from Ilia herself leads to him taking the first opportunity to dive off the ship. While the script reasons are obvious, there needed to be a spot for Spock to fill, he did seem a bit keen to get out of there. Let us just say that Decker earns his spot here for taking less than a heartbeat to ditch his role and run off with an approximation of the woman he loved. Number 9. Christopher Hobson. In a way, Hobson isn't the worst offender on this list by a country mile. As he said himself, it wasn't that he was a bad first officer, it was more that he was a bad first officer for Data. When the android took command of the Sutherland as part of Starfleet's blockade of the Klingon-Romulan border, Hobson requested a transfer, which was quickly denied. While there is sympathetic aspects to Hobson, his attitude to Data during the mission is harder to excuse. There is a time and a place for questioning the commander of a vessel, and mid-crisis is not that time. Data, acting on his robotic intuitions, ordered several actions to be taken that Hobson disagreed with. One action could have resulted in crew injuries, though Data was both aware of this and agreed with Hobson's plans to safeguard those crew. The main issue was the time it took for Hobson to carry out Data's orders. The second such event came at a more crucial time. Data, convinced as he was that there were cloaked Romulan warbirds nearby, ordered the Sutherland to ignore Picard's command to regroup, then reprogram torpedoes to expose those ships. Though of course Data felt no emotion, he was forced to feign rage to convince Hobson to obey the order. A first officer in this case should not have to be told twice. Hobson truly showed himself up. Number 8. Michael Burnham. As commander of the Discovery, Michael Burnham proved time and time again that she was a skilled Starfleet officer, one deserving of the rank. She was well on her way to showcasing this when the ship and crew were flung into the 32nd century, so let's be clear that Burnham is and remains one of Starfleet's best and brightest. And let's be honest, who hasn't staged a mutiny against a longtime friend and commander from time to time? Yes, here it is again, the mutiny aboard the Shenzhou. While we believe the matter of whether she started the war with the Klingons has been put to bed, she didn't, just to be clear. The chain of command aboard a starship is critical, particularly in a crisis situation. There is certainly a strong argument against Georgiou's actions that day. Had she simply listened to Burnham, perhaps much of the bloodshed could have been avoided. But Burnham's haste to take charge only served to confuse and delay any concerted effort to deal with the Klingon threat. She incapacitated her captain in a crisis situation, then attempted to take control, only for Saru to immediately see through her. This wasn't Burnham's finest hour, and as the court-martial decided, displayed that at this point in her career, she wasn't ready for the number 1 seat. Number 7. Pavel Checkov. As much as we love Walter Koenig's monkeys-inspired Pavel Checkov, he's got a rather large black mark against his name. Though his time on the Enterprise was marked with more Russian jokes than you could swing a bag of Quattro Triticale at, it was his time aboard the Reliant that probably scuppered any plans for a captaincy down the road. Serving under Captain Clark Terrell, Checkov was the executive officer during the Genesis research project. Perhaps we could blame this on Starfleet operating during peacetime, and therefore being a little less cautious when beaming down to barren worlds. But Checkov not only beams down himself, for which we will give him a pass, or we'd have to write 10 entries on the times William T. Riker acted like he was indestructible, but he allows Tyrell to beam down as well. The rest, as they say, is a dark page in history. They are discovered by Khan and his remaining crew, they are brainwashed, and Tyrell later shoots himself with a phaser to fight back against the tyrannical madman. Checkov, you do know that the number one of a starship is generally supposed to keep their captain alive, right? Number 6. Sylvia Tilly. Sylvia Tilly excelled in many roles throughout her time aboard the USS Discovery. She quickly established herself as someone the crew could connect with, something that is crucial in running a ship. However, and we are making some very big allowances for situation here, her time as first officer was not the brightest chapter in the ship's admittedly long history. In the short time that she is in the second biggest role on board, the ship is quickly overtaken by Osira and her cadre. As we said, there are extenuating circumstances here, but the sheer unlucky timing of it all stands against Tilly. However, from this, Tilly moved from the command path to training. As an instructor at the Academy, Tilly clearly found her true calling. With Star Trek Starfleet Academy due to begin airing in 2026 and the closing moments of Discovery's 5th season confirming that Professor Tilly had the longest tenure in Starfleet history, we're looking forward to seeing what she gets up to in the Academy. Number 5. Warf. Lieutenant Warf, as he was then, served as Data's first officer when both Picard and Riker were abducted by Arctis Baran and his mercenaries. On paper, Warf seemed like the perfect candidate. He had served as head of security for years following the death of Tasha Yar and had excelled in his duties on many occasions. The ever-present joke, how many times can Warf be denied in a single episode, may well have played into his attitude in Gambit. While attempting to get a course of action approved by Data, he found himself stonewalled on several occasions. On the one hand, this was business as usual for Warf, right? After all, can one truly claim to be an officer on the Enterprise D if they haven't said no to him at least once? However, Worf's fatal flaw here was letting that frustration with Data show. After being given the authority to proceed with a course of action, he quite obviously and unprofessionally expressed his irritation, putting Data on the spot and quite frankly making a fool of himself. Thankfully, this was an isolated incident, as technically he wasn't serving as first officer during the events of Change of Heart, so Worf can be forgiven, especially with his gracious acceptance of Data's rebuke in private. If anything, as inappropriate as Worf's actions were, they were a good example of an officer on the way to becoming a more mature, efficient one, and one who knows when to mind their manners. Number 4. Commander James T. Kirk. Hopping universes for a moment, and here we analyse the actions of a certain James T. Kirk, the once and future captain of the ISS Enterprise. In the context of the Mirror universe, as an officer, he pretty much did everything it was expected of him. He rose through the ranks, becoming the first officer under Christopher Pike. There he bided his time, establishing some crew alliances, then assassinated his former commander. As a Mirror Universe officer, we say full marks, Jim, fair play. As first officer to Christopher Pike, we cry foul. Sure, Checkov may have allowed his captain to be killed due to a wee bit of negligence, but he didn't actually pull the trigger. Kirk has no such excuses. Kirk's ascension to the big chair on the Enterprise serves as a warning to all others who serve with him, and a reminder that command can still be a burden, no matter which universe you're currently attempting to dominate. Still, at least he reigned for a long time with no challengers, and all was well. Spock, what are you doing with that Tantalus device? Number 3. Jonathan Archer. Jonathan Archer could have been a fantastic first officer for Maxwell Forrest. The ingredients were all there. He supported Maxwell even when the latter took command of Enterprise for himself. He stoically accepted that Hoshi Sato, with whom he had a romantic involvement, ditched him for Forrest to advance her career. Finally, he even brought Forrest the information about the USS Defiant, captured by the Tholians possessing technology from the future. One could easily say that Forrest brought about his own demise here. He refused to acknowledge Archer's information, even going so far as to plan to capture Archer should the latter attempt to take action without him, which he did. Archer, clever little devil that he was, sent the information about the Defiant to Fleet Admiral Gardner, who overruled Forrest. Forrest ultimately is taken down by his lack of understanding. He believed that Archer had no ambition to rise through the ranks. He was wrong, and it cost him his life when the Tholians overpower and ultimately destroy Enterprise, all while Archer watches from the bridge of his new ship, the Defiant. Number 2. Cavett. If the role of the first officer is to help the efficient running of a ship, then Cavett is behind in every respect. Let's begin with his cold welcome of Tom Paris in Caretaker. Paris was Janeway's choice. She specifically requested the man be aboard her vessel. Whether he supported it or not, Cavit's duty was to help the young man find his place. Instead, Cavit, along with the chief medical officer and several others, saw to it that Paris knew how unwelcome he was, going so far as to warn Ensign Kim against any kind of relationship with him. That is anathema to the smooth running of a starship. One does not ensure efficiency by turning crewmates against one another. We also have to question Cavit's choice, when seeing a shockwave approaching the ship, to take a running leap across the bridge. Honestly, what was he expecting? Sorry, Cavit, Chakotay was the better man for the job. Number 1. Maxwell Burke. The first officer aboard the USS Equinox had quite the history. He was, in fact, one of the few serving officers who remembered B'Elanna Torres from the Academy, and when he met up with BLT again, it caused a few ruffled feathers. Thankfully, this was quickly forgotten when he tried to murder everyone. Burke, along with his captain and the rest of his crew, were stranded in the Delta Quadrant by the Caretaker. Sound familiar? Well, there was a big difference between the Equinox and Voyager, one that has left audiences wondering, there but for the grace of the Cretonan Guard, for nearly 3 decades. The Nova-class ship was ill-equipped for a deep space mission, and was quickly and badly damaged in conflict. Burke, along with Captain Rudy Ransom, stumbled on the discovery that the bodies of the nucleogenic aliens could be converted into fuel, even if it killed them. He became the biggest champion of this dark project, even staging a mutiny when Ransom, belatedly, changed his heart and decided to find another way home. Burke first tried to take command of the Equinox, then, when the ship was too badly damaged to continue, attempted to run to the shuttle bay with several other crew members, all of whom were dispatched by the vengeful aliens. History's not going to remember him for his contributions to diplomacy, that's for sure. That's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you very much. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. You have been awesome. You've been wonderful. Please make sure that you're following us along on the various socials. I have been at Sean Ferrick, and remember to follow at TrekCulture as well. Until I see you again, hopefully you'll be a better first officer than any of these chumps. You look after yourself, you live long and prosper, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much.